Welcome Pythoneers or Pythonistas to the third part of module 6, which is class coding 101, basically class coding basics. So far we have written certain number of class blueprints and generated few number of objects. As we have seen, when we run a class statement, we got a class object. So here is the rundown of the main properties of Python classes. The following are the rundown of the main properties of the Python classes. So classes generate multiple instance objects. When we run a class statement, we get a class object. And the class statement creates a class object and assigns it a name. Assignments inside class statements make class attributes. Class attributes provide object state and behavior. So attributes of a class object record state information and behavior to be shared by all instances created from the class. Function def statements nested inside a class generate methods which process instances. Whatever we have discussing now, we have done practical coding on the same parts, but here we are putting bits of pieces together in one slide so that we can use it further. Then calling a class object like a function makes a new instance object. Each instance object inherits class attributes and get its own namespace. Then assignments to attributes of self in methods make per instance attributes. So let's take one example. Let's define a class named first class. The name of the class is first class, and inside we have defined set data method and then display method. Two methods are there. Now functions inside a class are usually called methods, but in a method function the first argument automatically receives an implied instance object when called, the subject of the call. So we need to create a couple of instances to see how this works. First instance or object. Okay, so first instance x is equals to first class, that's the name of the class, and we have to call that class, then only we will make an object. So x is equals to first class and parenthesis, and again we'll call y is equals to first class. So we have two instances. Now two instances will have their own namespace. Now by calling the first class, by calling the class which is the first class, this way we generate instance objects which are just namespaces that have access to their classes attributes. Properly speaking, at this point first class have two methods inside it, and then from that we have generated two instances. Those are x and y. one first is x, which will have the same data, and then another will have the data inside it, that is an attribute. So x and y are instances of the first class, that's a class, still they will have their own namespace. So at this point we have three objects, two instances and a class. So at this point we have three objects, 1, 2, 3. So out of three objects, what are those? This is a class. First class is a class, and x and y are instances of this first class. Of course, that is also an object. So now let's try to explore these things in Jupyter Notebook. So class coding basics is the part name, and then we will begin. We will do it step by step. First step is to make a class. Make a class. So let's make a class using class statement, and then we will give a name of the class, and then parentheses at this moment are optional. If you have, if you don't have any class to be inherited, then we don't need to give parentheses. Then we'll just use pass to just pass down the uh, statement. So we have made a class. Let's check what it is. So type of first class is class type. It's a class. So first step is done, which is to make a class, and the second step is write class attributes inside the first class. First class is our class. Write class attributes inside the first class. Let's write. Again, we will take the same class, and then inside with indentation, x is class attribute 1 and y is class attribute 2. So these are the two attributes I have added to the first class. So basically, as these are in global namespace, so these two are called class attributes. Class attributes. These are not just attributes, these are class attributes. So let's run those class attributes. Okay, just a minute. Okay. Yes, first class dot x. When I use attribute reference method, I am getting class attribute 1, and if I give first class dot y, I am getting class attribute 2. So we have crossed two steps. We have added class attributes. Now we will write instance attributes inside the first class. Instance attribute is different, class attribute is different. Now we will write instance attribute. So to write instance attribute, you have to use a inbuilt function which is init. So which actually constructs our class. So the above attributes are just like a reference variables. They are just a reference variable, but here these are instance variable which can be inherited, which can be connected with the each instance that we create. That's why these are called instance attributes. So three attributes I have created, I have attached. First is A, second is B, third is C. So these are the A, B, C. Now A is my object in this function or item in this function. Now I am connecting this A function to a variable called self dot instant attribute. So from now onwards, if you want to use a variable inside any method in instances, this is what you have to use, because these variables you are referencing or connecting with this variable name. So from now onwards, we have to use this name in our functions to do some operations. Let's see. So now we have created instance attributes also. Now we will call those class attributes as well as instance attributes, and we'll see the difference. First class attribute, first class dot x, we are able to fetch the value. Whereas, and the second I'll call instant attribute, first class dot instance attribute, and I'm getting nothing. So that is the difference. Type object first class has no attribute insta at one. So that's basically an instance attribute. Now the fourth step is to create an object, because you have written a class, and then you have written class attribute, then instance attribute. Then the fourth step is to create an object, because your class is ready. To create an object, you have to call the class. You have to call the class, and then inside you have to send arguments inside the call option of the class. So as we have three instance attributes, A and then B and then C. So that's why I'm writing instance attribute 1 value, instance attribute, oh sorry, 2 value, and instance attribute 3 value. So let me create this object. So my object is ready, or my instance is ready, because everything in Python is object. So it's better to call from now onwards, so that it will be clear for you. From now onwards, when you generate anything from a class, when you call a class, what we get is an instance. Basically, it is a real entity object. It's a real object. It's a real entity. So now you have created your object. So now what we'll do is we'll call instance attribute. Now to call that instance attribute, what you have to use is object dot insta at one. So that's what I have told you. From now onwards, this insta at one, whatever you mention here, that would be our instance variable. For every instance, this is the name we are going to use. So that's why you may sometimes think that why you are writing same thing again and again. So self dot again, this is, so there is a specific reason. So these are implicit assignments. AB here, a comma b comma c are implicit assignment variables. Now what I'm doing is I'm referencing this variable with the self dot inst attribute. This self keyword, whichever gives, this connects this insta attribute to every instance. So that's why we call these variables attributes are instance attributes. So that's the reason we write self dot insta at one, or self dot variable name. So now object one dot insta at one. So we got instance attribute 1 value, object 1 insta at 2, instance attribute value. So object 1 dot x is a class attribute. As it is a class attribute and it is in top level of file, so it is a global scope. That variable is that class attribute is in a global scope. That's the reason it can be attached to each instance, every instance that we create. So object 1 dot x, what I got is class attribute 1. Whereas on the other side, if you try to fetch, if you try to connect your first class, the class name with instance attribute, then you cannot, because instance attribute is related to instance only, where and that is local to your instance. That's what it is, a local scope. Again, the scopes comes into the picture. You just, if you are not aware of scopes, then go back to my functions module, which is fourth in that part 2 scopes video. You just watch it and come back, so it would be very clear. So X is global scope and it is in local scope, so I'm unable to fetch it. Now I will move on to the, so I hope you got the difference between class attribute and instance attribute. Assignment to attributes of self in methods, which makes per instance attribute. So the self is very important. You can use any keyword. It's not keyword. You can use any word, but it should be the same word you have to use in completely throughout your program. But self is the generally followed in followed by the Pythoneers. So that is the reason, if you follow the whatever thing which we have been following, it would be better so that everybody can make out easily. So now write actions or methods. So still till now we have made a class, and then we have written class attributes, instance attribute using self, and then we have created or generated an object or instance, and then we have called the attributes of instance as well as class. So now we will look into the fifth one, is we have to write actions or methods to class. We have to add actions or methods to class. Let's add. So in first class is first. A parenthesis is optional, it is all up to you, but generally I keep it. And then X, uh, class attribute 1, class attribute 2, then instance attributes using init inbuilt function, then two functions in it, set data and then display. These are the two functions I have defined inside this. Let me execute this and see what all we can do with this. So now I have again created or generated two instances. The first instance name is object1, and then second instance name is object2. And by and large, the instance object attribute 1 value and triple one, I have given some values to it. Now let me execute and see. So I have generated objects also. Now I just want to check whether the function that I have created inside the blueprint of the first class, am I able to fetch it fetch it and apply it to object that I have, or object or instance that I have generated. Let me check. Object1 dot set data, and then inside Radhema. So that means I am attaching this Radhema value to the data variable here. So then what I will do, I will use display method to display it. Let me check whether we are able to display it or not. Yes, fantastic. We are able to display it. See, in one function, I have attached a value. In another function, I am able to display it. So that's what. So with this, we successfully demonstrated attributes and actions, class attributes, instance attributes, and then creation of making of class and generation of instances, and then actions or methods of instances. So at this point I will close this session, and then I will see you in another video with more exciting content. But by that time, you just keep watching other videos and keep spreading about this and keep liking it. Thank you and see you again.